So, herzlich willkommen zur nächsten Session. Oh, fantastisch. Vielen Dank. I will switch to English now. So, you're very welcome to the final session of today. So we will talk about the operating field of the future and technical implications you can expect in the next years. And you will see also beginning from next year in the products and also in the, let's say, increased benefits of clinicians. So who we are, exactly. So we are representatives of a user association called OR.net. The user association cares about developing communication interfaces for medical devices in the operating room. Why do we do this? We do it because medical devices are mainly separated. They are not able to communicate across vendor boundaries. They are not able to be interoperable between different vendors. So if you have a vendor with several products, the vendor has the opportunity to control the communication between the devices by using his own proprietary communication bus. But it is not possible currently, according to the state of the art, to connect two devices of two different vendors together and to use them as a, let's say, combined tool or a combined system. To overcome this obstacle and this limitation is the main objective of this user association. We will show you the results of the work of the last years, some example results, and I will show you in my talk so how to use the results. So, and to pave the way for the future, for the integration of devices in the operating room amongst each other to make it interoperable. So why is it necessary? So we are currently in the stage of the connected, we are living in a connected world. We are living in a more and more digital world. Every user knows or has some experience with connected devices from consumer field. For instance, imagine that you rent a car and put your smartphone on the middle of the console, and the smartphone automatically connects to the car system, to the speaker. You are able to use the boxes of the car and the speaker system to make your phone calls during driving. And it doesn't matter which car you use, and it doesn't matter which smartphone or which operating system you use. This is a situation we don't have in the field of medical devices, and that's what we want to change. So I will give you the introduction, and afterwards my colleagues will introduce several more specific aspects on the topic. So for the motivation, I already mentioned the overarching goal, so for the integration of devices. So the main motivation for the clinician, or what we can observe as obstacles for the daily clinical work that hinder or that are hurdles to the clinical work is, for instance, that we need, or that the clinician need to look for the information currently today. So there are several devices from several vendors in the operating room. This information is distributed. Every device has its own display. Every device has its own, let's say, control for controlling parameters like adjusting drill speed of a drill or of the light of an endoscope or whatever. So, and this brings the challenge for the clinical staff to collect information instead of information being brought to the clinical staff. This also results in breaches in media communication. So it's common in the hospitals to have media breaches for during the transport of information. You have electronic information, sometimes it's printed out on paper, and then you have to redigitize it to enter into the system. Sometimes you still use like imaging devices. You burn a CD and then go to the next station and read in the CD using the interface for the clinical information system to attach it to the patient file or whatever. So these are things that are quite common, still quite common in the hospitals, and this should not be there according to the state of the art in other areas. We also have here some examples. One of my favorite examples is this one here. This one here, image top left. It's seen from neurosurgical intervention. The surgeon is using an ultrasound device. Here's the patient. He's using the ultrasound on the head of the patient, and he's looking on the image here of the ultrasound device. So you can ask yourself, who of you would install the navigation system in your car on the back seat? So, no one. Why is it accepted and why is it common in medicine? Why is not the image of the ultrasound device in the line of sight of the surgeon, where he can rely on this information in the moment when he needs the information? Of course, he doesn't need the information during all the procedure in front of him, but as soon as he is taking the ultrasound probe, this information should be here somewhere in the line of sight, where he can also see the surgeon. There are many other examples like this. Of course, every device has its own cabling and the stuff. So that's what we want to overcome with our approach. I would like to show you 4 integration scenarios. So what is possible with the availability of communication standard with vendor-independent communication. So the first benefit we see is it's technically expressed here as a one-way communication, just showing parameters of one device and combining them with parameters of another device. So you see here a screenshot of an endoscopic screen, and on the left-hand and right-hand side you have parameters shown from devices from other vendors that are relevant for the current clinical work step. So imagine like drill speeds or patient parameters from the anesthesia monitor that are relevant here. So you just display it, and this is a state of technology that is currently not available. If the surgeon would like to have like information from the patient monitor, he needs to look to the patient monitor or ask the anesthesiologist or some other stuff to provide this information. So then we have the second stage of two-way communication. So one-way communication is just a visualized parameter of one device to another device. Two-way communication means you send parameters in the first way and then offer the opportunity to control the devices over the network. So here you see an example where we used a microscopic screen to adjust the drill speed of another vendor. So, and the vendor of the microscope and the vendor of the drill didn't cooperate it directly and implemented the interface directly to each other. Both implemented the user-independent interface, and so it was possible to connect the devices and, as benefits for the clinical staff, to hand over the control to the responsible person. In this case, the surgeon operates the monitor, but of course it can be also another person in the operating room. So stage 3, of course, this first 2 examples doesn't add that much, let's say, functional value to the clinical operations. So it's just more or less a replacement or a substitute to the current situation. The next step is the support of clinical tasks. Here we can use this medical device interoperability approach to combine 2 systems to achieve more value for the clinicians. So here you see again a microscope. The surgeon is using the microscope, and the zoom value of the microscope is transferred as a parameter to a PAC system. And the slice, the CT slice in the PAC system is selected according to the zoom value. That means if the surgeon has the point of interest and sees it in the microscope, the correct CT slice is selected automatically for him. So he doesn't need to scroll through the slices and so on. It's automatically connected, and both systems cooperate for this specific surgical task. And of course, as you see here in the image, we can then easily create some applications like augmented reality to let's say, augment the microscopic view to give the surgeon some added value for orientation, for instance. And finally, the third step is if we have a vendor-independent device communication, we can create the intelligent or smart operating theater of the future, an operating room that knows what's going on, that knows the current situation, the process of the surgical workflow, and supports the surgeon according to the current state. So the surgeon, or in this case the actor, takes a navigation pointer and automatically the operating room detects and switches the monitor and the screen of the navigation system that is needed for the current step. As soon as he puts away, it will fade. Then he's taking a speculum into the nose and the light adapts automatically to signal to the staff in the operating room, attention, we are starting the intervention now. And finally he takes the endoscope. Endoscope is switched off, and as soon as it is inside of the nose, the system, the computer, the intelligence of the operating room detects this and switches the endoscope on and the light off to get the maximum contrast image to the information. So this means, what does it mean? So this technology enables a wide number of other technologies. So if we have access to a vendor-independent access to the devices and a vendor-independent communication of the devices, we can enable the, let's say, the future of the operating room. What is the future operating room? From our perspective, in the next years, it is an operating room that, let's say, releases or that frees the surgeon and the clinical staff from all activities that are not value-adding. Typing the patient name somewhere, calling for data sets, things the clinical staff has to do to perform a work step like cutting or removing a tumor or whatever, but he's paid for the work step of removing the tumor and for cutting. He's not paid for looking for information. Of course, he needs the information to do the work step he's paid for, but this is the scene we see in the next years that is reliable and can be expected. So, so these have been 4 examples for what medical device interoperability will bring in the future. My colleagues now will talk about different aspects in more, let's say, detail. That's my last slide I would like to show to you. So how to get there? So what is necessary to get the device, vendor-independent device communication? It's a standard that is that was recently released. It's an IEEE standard called SDC, Service-Oriented Device Communication. This is the, let's say, the mean interface description that enables this device interoperability, and also the ORNet User Association cares about the standard and supports the vendors in integrating the standard into their devices, defining different scenarios, how we can, let's say, develop the devices from currently not communicating devices to devices with open communication. So my colleague Frank Beger will talk about this later. And the standard was released in September this year, and we will have the first products on the market with this standard in next year, first half of next year. So this standard will enable the operating rooms to have customized systems and customized also for the clinicians. So if they have different techniques they would like to use for their surgical interventions, these standards enables the, let's say, task-specific or workflow-specific combination of the systems and their cooperation. Of course, we have some other topics we discuss and we care about from the user association point of view. There are software stacks that need to develop and that are provided to the public and to the medical device vendors so that they can implement the standard. Then, of course, standardization is a topic. So we have colleagues that are active in the international standardizing committees in the IEEE, and now also in the one of the standards is also already an ISO standard. Human-machine interaction is important, more and more important, because the more power you give to the computer and the more control, the more you have the, let's say, the need to control what the computer is doing. And so you need to check this somehow from the human point of view. And then finally, of course, approval strategies, how to certify such systems. This is also a topic where we care about. And my colleagues in the next talks will discuss this in more detail. So this was the first part of the presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. I think we will have time for one or two questions. We don't have discussion time afterwards. So if you have questions now, I'm happy to answer. Otherwise, me and also my colleagues will be here after the final talk for discussions. Thank you very much. And then I would like to hand over my next colleague. It's Dr. Czaplik from University Hospital Aachen. He's a clinician, and he will give insight into the clinical benefits of the technology.
Yeah, thank you very much. You have already heard and seen several very valuable, meaningful clinical applications. And the reason for that is that we have also some clinicians involved in the project, surgeons and anesthetists, who are giving, who are sharing ideas, who are sharing their thoughts and their needs. And this is very important, as you all know, in the field of biomedical engineering, where often solutions are created for problems that do not exist. And so we are very proud to have also a medical board in our project, in our association, telling us what is worth to develop and what is not worth. So you have seen and heard already facts about the presence, about the diversity of medical devices, the diversity of interfaces that are currently available in the operating rooms, with lots of traps, lots of problems and dangers inside the operating room, and also with huge potentials if we really would use the information and the data that are created there. We have often challenges in information processing because of information overload, because of missing information, because of information that are not displayed there where needed, but somewhere else. And we are by far not in the digitization, in the fourth industrial revolution, but we are already in a very early stage. So we have to collect few data, lots of data, by using paper-based documentation. And if we have a medical documentation system, we just collect very few data, and by far not all data that are present and data that can be used for added values. If we would have data fusion, we would have information exchange between devices. We could collect and aggregate all data, for example, for displaying them on a central touch screen, for example, where we have all information present that are interesting, that are meaningful in the moment. We also could think about customizable views in innovative devices such as smart watches, smart glasses, or very displays that are located on wise locations. We can also think about modern HMI concepts, not only to display data, but also to control devices, such as joint uniform user interfaces that can provide operation across devices to operate manufacturer-independent devices of diverse classes and diverse kinds. And we can also, like already seen in the slide before, the integration in mobile devices, in smartwatches and in smart glasses, to display the context relevant, the context adaptive information, such as the current information about one single patient, meaningful hints, meaningful advices, such as that the patient is not ventilated correctly in the moment, such as the checklist is not followed correctly, so that the information are displayed in the time and in the place where they are needed in the moment. One of the most important things for doing that is the context adaptiveness. So the process and the workflow of, for example, a surgical procedure, like you can see on the bar on the bottom, is split into several surgical steps, so that the system know the current stage, the current step of the surgical intervention, and can give context adaptive hints, context adaptive advices, and also some information and alerts if something is going wrong. This is especially interesting for the ICU in my point of view, where we have lots of checklists, we have lots of guidelines, we have lots of standard operating procedures that allow a structured and guideline adaptive therapy, and it's almost impossible to keep all of these guidelines and SOPs in mind and to be up to date. So this is almost impossible for every clinician. So to integrate the information, the SOPs, and to display the information context adaptive is a very interesting future vision in my point of view. If we go a little bit further, after having collected the data, fused the data, we can also think about clinical assistance systems, partial automation even. So the data are automatically sorted, they are aggregated, they are prioritized, so that at the end we can also have some intelligent alarms, display the information, the problems that are currently the most important problems. So as a clinician, especially on ICU, you have to consider thousands of parameters and scores and data that you have to combine in your head. And if you have if you are responsible for 15 or 20 patients, this is a hard job. So that in my point of view, clinical assistance systems can really provide good, meaningful help for the practical work. Last but not least, if all these data are available in kind of database or a kind of data hub, they can also be provided for telemedical support, either in the hospital itself or even at home, where, for example, a physician can supervise or support a young assistant doctor who needs help in the hospital, for example, at nighttime or during the weekend. And for that, we have developed a mock-up system, a demonstrator on a tablet PC, where all the data from one operating room or from several operating rooms can be collected, and also video and audio communication can be established. So that's all from my point of view, and we can go further with the next talk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Čaplik. It's a pleasure for me to introduce the head of the industrial working group of the User Association, Mr. Frank Beger.
Hello, my name is Frank Beger, and I'm talking about the added value of the medical industry in the ORNet topic. And the industrial belongings and selling doesn't work without looking what the users need and what they demand on the industry. Also, right to the beginning, I have a statement from a clinician who has attended the session here. Whenever we buy medical devices, the manufacturers must be committed to an integration of the SDC standard into their products. This way, we ensure for us that we will buy future-proof solutions that offer added value. It is more than a wish, it is more a need for future technology to add SDC standard and to be committed to the RNet idea and concept. In this chart, I offer you a couple of clinical everyday demands of the users. So the users and the clinic want to optimize and integrate all the use of their equipment so that they get a direct access via a centralized, sterile, controllable system or workstation. And very important is that the surgeons and the anesthesiologists are able to control all their belongings from the sterile area and not to have somebody else to call a nurse to adjust the parameter of any device. And they would like to have an improvement in interdisciplinary cooperation in between the OR. As we were discussing the last time in the surgical field of the university clinic, we were part of a stress situation where the surgeon wants to adjust the OR table and nobody was in the room who is able to adjust the OR table from the unsterile field. The surgeon is sterile. He has no possibility to control the remote control. It would be a nice idea if he could ask the anesthesiological doctor to adjust it from his side via his workstation. So that is a simple example of interdisciplinary cooperation in the OR. Another very, very strong topic is the new system should be easy and secure in operation and very effective and efficient in the OR. The users and the need the use of the latest and best technology in the OR, so that means they would like to have the best technology, either it's from the one or the second vendor. It should be integrated into the OR so that even small and medium-sized manufacturers will have the innovative functionalities to bring into the OR. And one strong demand is that the technology they buy today is guaranteed proof for the future. What are the wishes of the manufacturer and the industry? The industry is a very high demand is that they will be selling innovative technology even in the future. And they would like to have high customer loyalty so that their need is in the future. They would like to offer innovative solutions with low impact in implementation effort and low registration cost, so that they have the possibility to bring new devices even if they are small and medium-sized manufacturers. And one big point for the future is that all the industry and vendors would like to win tenders, because I know of several clinics in future developing of their new OR system and OR they created in the future. They have a checkbox for ORNet or SDC ready. What is our objective from the ORNet EFA? So I placed a model of our phases we went through. We went through all the first three phases by research projects. We have the first phase where we coordinate interoperability projects. The second was the development of the standard. And in the third phase, we develop the dissemination and establish of the standards. We develop test platforms and implementation for SCC libraries. The phase 4 and 5 is for bringing products in life, the product development and approval, and bring them to a product launch. In the second half of the slide, you see here the initial ORNet research project and a couple of projects which are complement the process. For example, the TIM project, which is located here in this show a couple of rows. The ORNet has a SCC symbol, which is already mentioned. That's the left one, which is for vendors that they can prove that they are SCC ready or SCC confirmed. What does that mean? We have three standards of application. The standard. The first is very simple. You have a device which is already existing. Then you place a communication box which is SDC able to transmit from one device to the second. The third concept is to place a transmitter card into your device, which offers the possibility to the communication via standard of SDC with another device. And the third and very high level range is the new device has an implementation of native SCC standard itself. Here is an example of the smallest ever, you may imagine, a network of the smallest unit, a microscope control the radio system, or in between you can place a foot switch, a universal foot switch, which is able to control both other devices. Or you have the big concert of all devices which are not centralized in network, or you place in between a surgical or a workstation which combines the interoperability of all the devices in the OR. We have developed a mobile workstation which is in the TIM project shown here at the booth. And the mobile workstation offers a possibility to offer all the functions such as in the large central workstation for surgical belongings. And this allows the OR personnel to operate in a very tiny and little space next to the OR table, which can be used by the surgeon itself or the sterile nurse from the sterile area. And the mobile device the MME looks like this, is offering some very interesting parts. You can put all the functions in a group so that you are able to have process-orientated functional control of, for example, here the OR table and the high-frequency device or the light on one screen, so that you can put all your belongings to the control station for yourself. This is a chart of all the partners of the former ORNet project, and which welcomes you to step in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to introduce Björn Andersen. Next speaker who will give an insight about the standardization, so therefore also the basic technology that enables all these applications. And so he will talk about the current state of the standardization procedure and the general approach, how we solve this problem.
I will. Thank you very much. I will talk about standardization in the next couple of minutes, and I would like to give my main message right away. The next couple of slides, it's about 7 that you have to go through. You will see lots of magic numbers with up to 10 digits, and you're not supposed to remember all those. But what I would like you to remember after my talk is 3 letters. It's just SDC, Service-Oriented Device Connectivity. I gave you a little help here. What you need to do is to remember those and hopefully use the standards that we have come up with. And I'll give you a short explanation what we did there, things that have been, things that are, and things that have not yet come to pass. The big overview over these is this slide. So this is a collection of standards that have been, well, and still are. Those here at the bottom, those are a little older. Like this one is from 2004. It's a domain information model which allows you to describe your medical device in a machine understandable way. And we took that and we enhanced it a little, and what came out is this very comprehensive domain information and service model, which allows you to represent your device, your medical device, on the network. Then there's a standard that was originally invented for the communication of printers. I almost don't dare to tell you that. It's even from Microsoft, I think. Anyway, so what's on top of that, what we build on top of that is what we call medical devices profile for web services. So this is a standard to send medical data over the wire. Now these two have to go together. You have a model of a device and you have a transport technology. And what we have here is a binding standard. This binding standard pretty much tells you which services of the transport technology you need to use in order to transport the messages, the medical device information base that represents your medical device on the network. So whenever you hear those magic three letters, SDC, Service-Oriented Device Connectivity, it usually refers to those three standards. Why did we split those up into two? We could have just made one protocol definition, and we actually thought about that, but we decided that we want to be more flexible. So if we want to change this transport technology in the future, then we can just replace that, write a new binding. Well, you don't have to touch the structure definition of the medical device domain information and service model. We even tried that. It is actually possible. We always told people it's possible, and now we gave proof that it actually is. So we used a different transport technology here, implemented a different binding, and it works. It's completely transparent to the library user. He still sees the model of his device and doesn't really understand what's happening below that, but that's okay. That's why we built it that way. Now, we have a structure definition, we have a transport technology. What's missing is semantics. We need to enable the machines to understand what the other one is saying. So we need codes, we need a controlled vocabulary, a nomenclature. And luckily in the 11073 series of standards that's already there, it's called the 1010X series. It's a couple of terminology standards from which you can draw controlled terms that have one well-defined meaning. And we use that in our structure definition to describe the elements, the leaf nodes of our data model in order to have a receiving machine actually understand the data. There's a difference, obviously, between reading data and understanding data. And here we want to help the understanding, the machine interpretability. Now, you can think of this data model as kind of a big box of Lego bricks. You have Lego bricks of all kinds of colors and shapes, and when we ask a manufacturer to use those Lego bricks to build, for example, an endoscope, they would probably come up with very different solutions. I mean, they would still kind of look the same, but they would also be different in very many ways. So what we need is something like building instructions. So how do you use the data model to come up with a very specific type of device? So that's what we have up here in the so-called device specializations. And that's one of the things that has not yet come to pass for SDC, but we're actively working on that. A project is in fact starting January 1st. Now, this is pretty much just a listing of what I just presented to you with dates on it. As I said, very long numbers, up to 14 digits. Well, the last one's the year. Never mind. The first one has been already approved in 2016 by the IAAA, and it's now an ISO standard too. The second one is going through FDIS ballot at the moment, so it will be an ISO standard early next year. The third one, which is the binding, is the most recently approved standard, and the FDIS ballot has not yet begun. But as you can see, part of this is already standardized in ISO, and the rest will be very soon. We talked about the nomenclature. There's actually a nomenclature revision underway now, and we hope that surgical terms will be in there, so we actually have the opportunity to describe our surgical devices using these controlled terms. We are developing the SDC device specializations project starting early January, and we hope to present the first project authorization requests in January in San Antonio to the respective IEEE working group, which several of us, myself included, are members of. And a new thing that we have here, that we have going here, is what we call key purposes. That is a collection of roles that a device can play in an ensemble of many devices. So that's kind of, when you go into a network of devices and you're a device yourself, you want to explain, what can I do here? I can fulfill the role of, for example, providing data for clinical decision systems. That could be a role. Now, we're not the only ones developing standards. For example, HL7 is also very active at the moment, and they've come up with what they call fast healthcare interoperability resources, commonly known as FHIR. And the good thing about FHIR and SDC is that they have been developed in parallel over the years, and many members of the one working group have also been members of the other, and we communicated a lot, and that means what we reached is a pretty good mappability of those standards. That means we can transfer SDC device data into FHIR resources without a lot of data being lost, in contrast to older HL7 protocols where you'd actually lose a lot of things. So a couple of decisions have been made on the side of the FHIR resources that enable us to use them very well, for example, to communicate device data not only between devices, but also between devices and modern clinical information systems, hospital information systems, that could also use the device data for documentation, for secondary use, you name it. The thing that enables just this is called an implementation guide. So whenever you tell someone how to use FHIR resources to use them for your use case, then you build an implementation guide, and that's what we're actually doing right now. We got 2 already that relate to IEEE 11073. That's one that relates to personal health devices and to point-of-care devices. And now the third sub-series of standards, the SDC, is also getting its own implementation guide, and we hope that to be ready in December, maybe early January. Now, whenever we talk about networking medical devices, we have to talk about security, and luckily efforts are underway there too. So 2 proposals that have, one thing that has been going on for a couple of years is the personal health device group Tiger team that's working on a security white paper for a couple of years now. It's recently been updated to a contemporary version. And what's also happening, that's actually a German effort, is 2 new working item proposals on the international stage, and one relates to process-related requirements for cybersecurity of medical devices, and the other 2 product-specific requirements. And those have just been approved a couple of months ago, actually, and the development of the content is now underway. And in parallel, there are a couple of activities in North America, namely the AMI-UL series of standards that also relate to cybersecurity of medical devices. One very German thing that has recently started due to regulation, to legislation on the German federal level, is the VESTA, which is basically a registry of interoperability standards. Most of you may have heard about that already. And we, of course, aim to be listed in that registry, because the 11073 SDC is one of the most important standards in healthcare in our point of view. So we want to be listed there, and maybe a future application of this registry will also be to recommend standards for best practice. And we, of course, hope to be recommended there for the use in device-to-device communication. What's also happening is there's a second half of VESTA being built right now, not the standards registry, but a project registry, more or less, and that's where telemedicine projects and applications can be listed, and we're considering to list a couple of research projects within the scope of the ORNet Association under that registry too. We also will hear a presentation about regulation, regulatory science in medical device connectivity. But the FDA, for example, is not only working on regulation, but they are also working on standardization. So this friendly person here on the right is actually an FDA standardization officer and regulatory officer and reviewer of pre-market submission applications, and he's our liaison officer in the IEEE 1173 working group, and has already visited the demonstrator site nearby in Aachen. And we're working actively with the FDA to achieve FDA recognition of the standards that we have defined. So, which is, well, kind of like the VESTA recommendation that we hope to achieve in Germany, is something for the US market. If the FDA recognizes a standard as being essential for healthcare, then that's a helpful thing on the market. Seeing that was my last slide, I would like to repeat the message that I already gave at the beginning. Standardization is in fact very important, because if you want open interfaces, you have to agree on something, and what you agree upon is the standard, the protocol definition. But it is also very important to talk about standards and to implement them. It's not enough that we have SDC on paper somewhere. You can go ahead and buy the SDC document from IEEE, but that's not going to help us for actually spreading the technology. What you need to do is you need to run SDC. You need to look into the libraries, you need to develop your products with connectivity in mind, and you need to use these standards. And because this is a very important point to us, we are here to present at this stage. I think this is the second time we present this on this stage and on many others around the globe. Thank you very much for your interest and your attention. Have a good evening.
Okay. Hello? Okay, thank you very much. Björn, it's a pleasure for me now to announce the final speaker. So we have one very important topic left. It's approval strategies. So how do you approve a combination of two systems from two different vendors if they want to communicate, if they need to be connected, and if they provide additional function that none of the systems alone can provide. This topic will be addressed by Dr. Jans from Aachen University, and he will give an outlook on the current state and the future developments in this field.
Thank you very much, Professor Neumuth, for the nice introduction. Yes, we heard a lot about technical feasibility, about use cases within the needs of the clinical operators, the users, the surgeons, and aesthetic world. So, and the question is, how are we going to solve the approval process and the risk management in the framework of these open interconnection of medical devices? So let's have a look at the actual state. If a clinical operator wants to have an added value on the OR and the data exchange between the devices, what kind of possibilities he has? So the first possibility is he buys one system from one big vendor, and this is one system for different kind of use cases. So this system has a lot of advantages. You have a data exchange and you have a system by one single source. And this is evaluated regarding risks, technical risks and human-induced risks. But there's also disadvantages. So the clinical operators, they really have to use, I just say have to use these devices and this room for 25, 30 years or more. And there's a second possibility, which is not really a possibility. So there is, if there's a clever technician or a clever IT technician in the hospital, which would be able to connect different kind of devices of different kind of manufacturers, then is definitely not advisable, because then the clinical operator would become the manufacturer, and then he would become liable. So this is not advisable. So, but we have to put a base for these clinical operators in order to use these open connections, this open interconnection of medical devices, so the OR.NET standard. And so for clinical operators, it's clear they want to have flexibility, they want to be independent regarding the technology and also economical questions or requirements. And also on the other side, small and medium-sized enterprises would now be able to participate in this market, which is now with the big vendors really difficult to participate in this market. But what we have to provide first, which kind of requirements we have to achieve. So the operators, they shall not be the manufacturer. So it's really important that we divide the responsibilities for manufacturers and clinical operators. So, and then we heard already a lot about the standardization, so we have to have a national, international standardization. and also what we really have to address, the safety and the usability, and we have to reach the same level as the proprietary closed systems. So before I talk about the challenges regarding the approval process, the risk management, let me start with an example of a device combination. There you see on the left the OR microscope risk class 1. On the right side, ultrasound generator, ultrasound device or handheld class 2B or 3. And you can imagine that the surgeon or our personnel wants to have a look in the camera, in the image, which kind of parameters are set in which way. So for example, the power. This is just a visualization. But on the other hand, you can imagine that the surgeon wants to control different kind of parameters, and he wants to control it from the handheld. And which is from the risk or safety aspect, the highest level, as we say, would be the release of this function of this device. So we worked with different kind of notified bodies, and if you have a look at the Medical Device Directive and the Annex 9, Rule 2.3, software which controls the device or influences the application will automatically have the same risk class as the medical device itself. So what does it mean for our examples? So the visualization, as you can see, point 1, would mean no change in risk class, which is really important. And the control or the influence of the application, as you saw, the control of the parameters or the release of this function would be risk class 2B or 3. And this is really the disadvantage or the fear for the manufacturers. They thought we have to develop this OR microscope according to risk class 2B or 3, but this effort they really cannot manage. So we came up with the idea and the approach of a modular certification, a modular approval process. So only this part of the software and the hardware, which can control the other device or the other functions, has to be developed according to these higher requirements of this risk class, which also includes input and output devices, and which includes the technical safety and also the human-machine interaction. In the future, the devices will not only have to exchange technical device profiles, but also different kind of other aspects which will be, I don't want to go into detail. If there's later questions, you're welcome to come and I will answer them. It's an extended intended use, countermeasures for networking risks, and also a description or a characterization of the user interface, how it will be displayed on central user interfaces, and also the clinical operator, they have to provide, they have to solve the quality of service requirements. And also, in order to make this approach work, the manufacturers have to provide different kind of tests, conformity tests, interoperability tests, and also a modular risk analysis. The first thing the manufacturer has now to prove is that his device is able to talk this new standard, the 11073 SEC standard, and to show that it's confirmed with this standard. The second one is he has to show that his device is really acting like he is, like he planned. So he has to show it in inter and interoperability tests. And to make it short, also in parallel, he can do these interoperability tests, for example, in different kind of connectathons, and where we think in the IHE, it could be a group like the SDC, or how we called it before, the OSCP group. So right now, we are working also on the modular risk analysis. If you can imagine, no manufacturer really wants to open the sensible data or the sensitive information of their risk analysis. So we are right now working on a modular risk analysis which allows to exchange informations in order to provide comprehensive and overall risk analysis. So one example you just have in mind, the OR microscope and the cutting device. if the OR microscope wants to control parameters and functionalities of the other device, he has to really know what kind of risk the other device can cause. So we are right now working on different kind of classes, criticality and reliability classes. And to make it short, we presented all our approval strategies to the FDA. Björn Andersen already mentioned it. And to make it short, till now the FDA and also the different kind of notified bodies, they don't see a showstopper in our approach. And the next steps will be that these strategies will be discussed with the industrial partners until the end of this year, and discussed with the FDA and the notified bodies again in the beginning of next year. And what also has to be done is a working group within our association which is responsible for the development of test specifications. So I just made it a bit short regarding the ongoing time. And yeah, this is my last slide. If you are interested, just visit the or.net website. And if you're tomorrow here, I really want to invite you to the CIM booth. There's another research project. It was a follow-up project to the or.net project. It's just right here, 50 meters in this direction on the North Rhine-Westphalia booth. And we can show you small examples in our surgical workstation where we combined and interconnected different kind of medical devices, and you are able to use them from a surgical cockpit. Thank you very much for your attention, and if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Jans. So are there questions for the speakers? Not yet? So you, as already mentioned by Dr. Jans, some of the colleagues will be here tomorrow at the booth of the North Rhine-Westphalia, I think it's the English word, for North Rhine-Westphalen, here in this hall. So you can meet them and ask questions if you have tomorrow. Otherwise, we thank you for your audience, and we wish you a happy evening. So we have to close. I think the fair already said we are closing at 6 o'clock. Thank you very much and have a nice evening. Good night.